he became so afraid of Muhammad's message that they planned to assassinate the Holy Prophet. Muhammad, peace be upon him, had no option except to migrate to another city, Medina, as commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This move was in the best interest of Islam. One night, he left Medina. This migration is called Hijrah, and the year in which it was undertaken is known as Sana Hijri, or the year of Hijrah. In the year 60 of Hijri calendar, after the death of Muawiyah, his son Yazid was made Khalifa of Islam by Muhammad's followers. This was totally against the will of all pious people of Islam, and it was against the treaty signed by our second holy Imam, Hasan and Muawiyah. Yazid was a man of loose character, doing immoral acts against the teachings of Islam. He was quite unfit to lead the Muslims. In Arabic, he is called Fasiq and Fajr, which means a man committing wrong acts and blunders and making others do so in utter disobedience of God. How such a person could be a Khalifa? Khalifa means the man who takes care of Islamic teachings and traditions and interprets the religious laws according to the Holy Quran. And the traditions, hadiths after the Prophet through Yazid, lived only 3 years, but he left a big scar. First year, he plundered Kaaba, the holiest shrine of Islam in the city of Makkah. This was a great shameful and sinful act. It was that very year he ordered to subjugate Hasan alayhi salam by taking bay'ah, for example, compel Imam Hasan to agree to admit the supremacy of Yazid in regard to Islamic laws. Imam Hasan alayhi salam categorically refused to do so. Yazid had already ordered his army commanders that in case Imam Hasan alayhi salam did not agree, he had to be assassinated. Imam Hasan alayhi salam left Medina for Makkah to perform Hajj and to proceed onward to Kufa, from where invitations were extended to him to visit the city and guide the people. But Yazid's men did not allow him to perform Hajj. Imam Hasan alayhi salam turned to Kufa. Yazid was very afraid of Imam Hasan alayhi salam, as Hasan was the third holy Imam, the Khalifa of Rasul and the defender of Islam in its real sense. At last, Imam Hasan alayhi salam, with his kith and kins, was surrounded in Karbala and was martyred on the 10th of Muharram by Yazid's army comprising of thousands of men after depriving them of food and water for 3 days. The martyrdom of Imam Hasan alayhi salam with 71 companions and 61 AH on the 10th of Muharram is commemorated throughout the world as the day of Ashur. It is commemorated in different ways. Majalis are held, procession are taken out. In Majalis, people recite Holy Quran, eulogies, give lectures, and revive the teachings of Islam. Unlike other religions, Islamic calendar starts with sorrow. Particularly during this month, Muslims do not wear new clothes, do not celebrate any happy occasions, do not arrange marriages, do not buy homes or go for sightseeing, even do not laugh or smile. The Muslims remember what had happened to Prophet Muhammad's grandson. Imam Hasan alayhi salam gave his life to save Islam, the religion of Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon them. This event of martyrdom of Hasan at Karbala is the most significant event of Muharram. Actually, it is pertinent and befitting to say that Imam Hasan alayhi salam saved Islam. Sallallahu.
Returning to his hometown with his mother and the newly wed bride. Passing camp pitched on one side and large army poised against the few in those tents. Wahab found out that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had been surrounded on all sides by Yazid's army. Yazid's army were insisting on Imam Hussein alayhi salam either to accept Yazid leadership or to die at their hands. Wahab carried the news to his wife and mother. When she was informed by Wahab that Imam Hussein alayhi salam with a few faithful followers was facing a big army of Yazid, she asked her son to hurry to aid Imam Hussein alayhi salam. All three of them came over to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the mother asked Imam Hussein alayhi salam to let Wahab join him. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam learned that Wahab had got married only a couple of days before, he insisted that Wahab must leave him and seek safety with his wife and mother. Wahab, a brave son of a brave mother, would not agree to this. "Oh Imam," Wahab said with his head bowed, "how is it possible for me to leave you and your dear ones in this condition? If I leave you and go away, I have not done my duty." Imam Hussein alayhi salam allowed Wahab to join his camp. Wahab fought bravely on the day of Ashura. His mother kept encouraging him for the camps until Wahab was martyred. Wahab's wife limped to his side, wiping off the blood from his face. Shim saw her and ordered his slave to kill her. Wahab's wife was the only woman martyr of Karbala. Salawat.
These children are our future, they are going to take Azadari in the next decades, in fact centuries. So we pray for their success. Please say another loud salawat. I request Brother Farshad to come and say Marsiya in Farsi. Bar Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawat.
Muhammad Ali Muhammad salawat. باز این چه شورش است که در خلق آن است، باز این چه نوحه و چه عذاب و چه ماتم است، باز این چه رستخیز عظیم است که از زمین بی نفخ صور خواسته تا عرش اعظم است. این صبح تیره باز دمید از کجا که از او کار جهان و خلق جهان جمله در هم است. او را طلوع می کند از مغرب آفتاب، کآشوب در تمامی ذرات عالم است. گر خوانمش قیامت دنیا بعید نیست، این رستخیز عام که نامش محرم است. در بارگاه قدس که جای ملال نیست، سرهای قدسیان همه بر زانوی غم است. جن و ملک بر آدمیان نوحه می کنند، گویا عزای اشرف اولاد آدم است. خورشید آسمان و زمین نور مشرقین، پرونده کنار رسول خدا حسین. محمد آل محمد صلی الله علیه در چشم روزگار بر او زار می‌گریست، خون می‌گذشت از سرای کربلا. از آب هم مزایده کردند کوفیان، خوش داشتند حرمت مهمان کربلا. زان تشنگان هنوز به عیوب میرسد فریاد العطش ز بیابان کربلا. آه از دمی که لشکر اعدا نکرد شرم، کردند رو به خیمه سلطان کربلا. کاش آن زمان سرادق گردون نگون شدی، وین خرگه بلند ستون بی ستون شدی. کاش آن زمان که این حرکت کرد آسمان، سیمابوار گوی زمین بی سکون شدی. کاش آن زمان که پیکر او شد درون خاک، جان جهانیان همه از تن برون شدی. کاش آن زمان که کشتی آن نبی شکست، عالم تمام غرقه دریای خون شدی. گر انتقام من نفتادی به روز حشر، با این عمل معامله در چون شدی. آل نبی چو دست تظلم برآورند، ارکان عرش را به تلاطم درآورند. بر خوان غم چو عالمیان را ثنا زدند، اول ثنا به سلسله انبیا زدند. نوبت به اولیا چو رسید آسمان تپید، زان ضربتی که بر سر شیر خدا زدند. آن در که جبرئیل امین بود خادمش، اهل ستم به پهلوی خیل مسها زدند. پس آتشی ز اخگر الماس ریزه ها افروختند و در حسن مجتبی زدند. وانگه سرادقی که ملک محرمش نبود، کندند و از مدینه در کربلا زدند. و از تیشه ستیزه در آن دشت کوفیان، پس نخلها ز گلشن آل عبا زدند. پس ضربتی که از آن جگر مصطفی دری، بر حلق تشنه خلف مرتضی زدند. اهل حرم دریده گریبان گشوده مو، فریاد بر در حرم کبریا زدند. روح الامین نهاده به زانو سر حجاب، تاریک شد ز دیدن آن چشم افتاد. نزدیک شد که خانه ایمان شود خراب، از بس شکست ها که به ارکان دین رسید. باد آن غبار چون به مزار نبی رساد، گرد از مدینه بر فلک هفتمین رسید. پر شد فلک ز غلغله چون نوبت خروش، از انبیا به حضرت روح الامین رسید. هست از ملال گرچه بری ذات ذوالجلال، او در دل است و هیچ دلی نیست بی‌ملال. ترسم جزای قاتل او چون رقم زنند، یک باره بر جریده رحمت قلم زنند. ترسم که از این گناه شفیعان روز حشر، دارند شرم که از گناه خلق دم زنند. دست اطاعت حق به در آید ز آستین، چون اهل بیت دست در اهل ستم زنند. فریاد از آن زمان که جوانان اهل بیت، گلگون کفن به عرصه محشر قدم زنند. جمعی که زد به همصفشان شور کربلا، در حشر صف زنان صف محشر به هم زنند. از صاحب علم چه توقع کنند باز، آن ناکسان که تیر به صید حرم زنند. روزی که شد به نیزه سر آن بزرگوار، خورشید سر برهنه برآمد ز کوهسار. موجی به جنبش آمد و برخاست کوه کوه، ابری به بارش آمد و بگریست زار زار. گفتی تمام زلزله شد خاک مطمئن، گفتی فتاد از حرکت چشم بیقرار. عرش آن زمان به لرزه در آمد که چرخ پیر، افتاد در گمان که قیامت شد آشکار. با آن که سر زدن عمل از امت نبی، روح الامین ز روح نبی گشت شرمسار. وانگه ز کوفه خیل علم رو به شام کرد، نوعی که عقل گفت قیامت قیام کرد. هم بانگ نوحه قلقله در شش جهت فکند، هم گریه بر ملائک هفت آسمان فتاد. شد وحشتی که شور قیامت زیاد رفت، چون اهل بیت به اون کشته فتاد. نوبار چشم دختر زهرا در آن میان، بر پیکر شریف امام زمان فتاد. به اختیار نعره حاجی حسین او، سر زد چنان که آتش از او در جهان فتاد. پس با زبان پرگنان بسعت الرسول، رو در مدینه کرد که یا ایها الرسول، این کشته فتاده به هامون حسین توست. این سید دست و پا زده در خون حسین توست. این نهل در کس آتش سوز تشنگی، دود از زمین رسانده به گردون حسین توست. این ماهی فتاده به دریای خون که هست، زخم از ستاره بر تنش افزون حسین توست. این خشک لب فتاده دور از لب فرات، که از خون او زمین شده جیهون حسین توست. آن سر که بود بر سر دوش نبی مدام، یک نیزش ز دوش مخالف جدا ببین. آن تن که بود پرورشش در کنار تو، غلطان به خاک معرکه کربلا ببین. یا رضعت الرسول زیدی زیاد دعا، کو خاک اهل بیت رسالت بداد داد. خاموش محتشم که دل سنگ آب شد، بنیاد صبر خانه طاقت خراب شد. خاموش محتشم که ز ذکر غم حسین، جبریل از روی پیامبر حجاب شد. تا چرخ سفله بود خطایی چنین نکرد، بر هیچ آفریده جفایی چنین نکرد. ای زاده ضیا نکرده است هیچگه، نمرود این عمل که تو شداد کردی. کام یزید داری از کشتن حسین، بنگر چرا به قتل که دلشاد کردی. بهر خسی که باد درخت شمالت است، در راه دین چه باد شمشاد کردی. ترسم تو را دمی که محشر برآورد، از آتش دور تو به محشر درآورد. و محمد آل محمد صلی
Jazakallah, brother Farshad. I request brother Zalshah to come and pay Pursa for Imam Zaman on the Muharram 6th Majlis. Three of your loudest salawat also.
لا الہ تو پڑھ لیا آپ نے مزائقہ سین کا، لا الہ کی تہ کے نیچے خون ہے شبیر کا. لا الہ کے پڑھنے والوں لا الہ سے پوچھ لو، لا الہ سے پڑھنے والوں لا الہ سے پوچھ لو. لا الہ تو بچ گیا لٹ گیا گھر شبیر کا. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ، الا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. نہ جس کی کوئی مثال ہے، نہ جس کی کوئی نظیر ہے، نہ جس کی کوئی مثال ہے، نہ جس کی کوئی نظیر ہے. وہ بے مثال شہنشاہ حسین ہے. حسین روح کائنات ہے، حسین فخر معجزات ہے. حسین روح کائنات ہے، حسین فخر معجزات ہے. خدا نے جس کو مرحبا ہے نفس مطمئن کہا، خدا نے جس کو مرحبا ہے نفس مطمئن کہا. وہ کربلا کا مصطفیٰ حسین ہے. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ، الا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. اے ہاشمی جوانوں کیا ہوا، کہاں چلے گئے ہو با وفا. صدا یہ فاطمہ کی تھی، صدا یہ فاطمہ کی تھی، کہ رن میں کوئی بھی نہیں، اکیلا رہ گیا میرا حسین. ہر میں حشر کا سما ہوا، پھوپھی سے جب سکینہ نے کہا، مجھے نہ نیند آتی ہے، مجھے نہ نیند آتی ہے، میں سوؤں کس پہ سینے پہ، چلا گیا میرا حسین ہے۔ تڑپ چکی شبیہ مصطفیٰ، مگر حسین بھی ڈٹا ہوا، پسر جواں کی لاش پہ، پسر جواں کی لاش پہ ہے مطمئن کھڑا رہا، یہ وہ خلیل کربلا حسین۔ اپنے خون کا غسل ملا، کفن ہے جس کی خاک کربلا، دفن بہن نہ کر سکی، دفن بہن نہ کر سکی، دھوپ میں پڑا رہا، وہ غریب کربلا حسین۔ چلو
جزاک اللہ۔ افضل بھائی کی صحت سلامتی کے لیے بلند السلام۔ I would request Maulana to come to the member, inshallah. Saiyid.com, I had a lot of questions, mashallah, keep bringing them. It brings interaction between us and Maulana, and he gives answers on that one. 300 Maulana Salawat. I ask all of you to move forward, please. Bring as much forward as possible.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. صلوات على محمد وعلى آله. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The first question that we'll be going through from the Slido questions. So we answered this one at least last night, but just for those who weren't present at last night's Q&A, I'll reiterate the answer. So the person asked, does it make a difference if you do your salah, your prayers together, like Maghrib and Isha, or like Dhuhr and Asr, or should we do them separately? So many of our marajir allow you to separate. Well, they all allow you to separate, and some have the fatwa, for example, like Ayatollah Sistani, hafidhahullah, he says that it's mustahab to separate. So if you pray your Dhuhr at Dhuhr time, your Asr at Asr time, your Maghrib at Maghrib time, and your Isha at Isha time, it's better than combining the Dhuhr Asr at once and Maghrib and Isha at once. Now, can you combine? Obviously you can. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you don't get any extra rewards and thawab for that. But you can check with your own specific marja. I only checked with Ayatollah Sistani. Some marajid don't make a difference between combining and separating. Next question was, are the faces of the holy imams allowed to be displayed on flags and other banners? If not, why are these types of flags sold in certain places? So, as far as the marajid that I've checked, I've never seen anyone that says that it's haram to put up faces. Now the condition that they put is that you cannot believe that this is the actual depiction of the Imam. So you have, for example, people in certain countries, right? They have these pictures you see or flags, and sometimes it'll be one of the Imams or a few of the Imams, and sometimes there's all 14 Ma'sumin, etc. So anybody can have these pictures in their homes. There's nothing wrong with that. But if somebody believes that these are the actual faces, this is what the exact Imams look like or the Prophet looked like, that's a problem, right? That's not part of our Aqidah, and you shouldn't believe that. But having these pictures, there's no problem with that. Third question. As a youth, what is the relevance of the tragedy of Karbala today? How can I apply it to my life, and should I educate others about it? So we talked a little bit about this last night, I believe, at the Q&A. Although last night it was in general. Over here, the person saying as a youth. So there's two parts to the question. One is, for a youth, what's the relevance of the tragedy of Karbala today? So we can take that question apart and look at it in a few different ways. One is, okay, well, what is the relevance of Karbala today? Whether you're youth or elder or whatever age you are. And Karbala has its significance in many different factors, right? Many different dimensions. One of them is that it keeps the society in check. If we truly understood the message of Karbala, we would make sure that anytime any sort of zulm and oppression that takes place, we as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we as lovers of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, should be the first to speak out against it, right, before anybody else. Because we learned from Imam Hussein how to stand up against oppression. Now that's when we see oppression happening outside. But there's a greater oppression too, and that's the oppression that we do to ourselves. ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي. Right? I oppress myself. I do zulm to myself. Anytime we sin, we disobey God, we give in to our egotistical, our arrogant, and carnal, animalistic desires, we're oppressing ourselves. We're destroying our akhirah. We're destroying our afterlife. So Karbala can also make it relevant for us that I should be reshaping my life. Why am I the same way that I was last year? How come there's no difference in me? We should be reflecting on ourselves and asking, right now, am I the type of person that would have been with the Imam back then? Or am I more like an individual who would have fought against the Imam? Am I a person right now that the Imam at the time is looking to for support? Or am I the type of person that I still have a long way to go before I could join and become a supporter of the Imam at the time? So these are the ways we can make it relevant today. Now specifically, since a youth asked, for youth, sometimes I think that when we hear these religious stories or stories about the Imams and scholars about how to improve your life or how they live their life, I think sometimes we feel like a disconnection. Like, it was back then, I don't really understand, how they were connected to Allah. But when we hear maybe some of the stories about the younger people who were there at Karbala, right? Like Ali al-Akbar, or like Qasim, or Aun and Muhammad, right? When we hear their stories, that should give us a reason to connect, right? That should give us an example that, no, it wasn't just these individuals who were older, right? The older people who were supporting the Imam. People of all creeds, of all faiths, people of all ideologies, people of all skin colors, people of all ages were there supporting the Imam. So it should give us, those who are younger, it should make us realize that there's no excuse for us not to improve. We've got an example in every single individual in Karbala. And some of our teachers and scholars say that if you have a problem in your life, you can find a way to heal it, you can find a solution in the episode of Karbala. If you haven't found it, you just haven't looked hard enough yet. The second part of the question was, how can I apply it to my life, which I think we answered a little bit. And the other part was, should I educate others about it? I'd say yes, but there's a condition. You can educate others about Karbala, provided you've educated yourself about Karbala first. Sometimes I think we get in the habit of wanting to tell everybody else about Islam, tell them about the characteristics and the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt. You want to tell them how right we are and how we're on the truth. You'd say, that's great. But if you're not living the truth yourself, then what's the value? If you tell individuals how great Imam was, and how akhlaqi they were, how much etiquette and piety they had, how generous they were, how kind they were, how forgiving they were, how soft they were with individuals, how they gave people the benefit of the doubt, how they're always looking out to take care of everybody, even their enemies. You teach them all this, that's great, theoretically. But then when they come to you and then they see your actions, they're going to say, what's the point of your philosophy? What's the point of your religion? If it doesn't change you, why are you bothering telling anybody else? Right? If, for example, you saw somebody who was telling you that eating animals is inhumane, the way they kill them in these slaughterhouses, it's bad, they feel pain, we shouldn't be, harming animals like this. And then as they're telling you that, they're cutting into a piece of steak. They're like, okay, if you don't do it yourself, then why are you telling me? Nobody likes hypocrisy. And so we don't want to go and spread the message of the Ahlul Bayt until we have an understanding of the message of the Ahlul Bayt. Once we live that message, then we should go and preach that to other individuals. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this is a perfect segue to the next question. Why do Sunnis seem indifferent to the tragedy of Karbala? How can we bring them to understand it in more depth? So for that second question about educating the Ahlul Sunnah, I would go back to the same answer. Until we've educated ourselves about Karbala, I wouldn't go ahead and spread that message to anybody else. I don't think there's a point. We can argue about history all we want, but what's the issue, right? It's not going to help anybody. Just knowing a piece of history is not enough. It has to be transformative. It has to cause some change in your life. If not, then, what's the point? It doesn't have any value to it, or it doesn't have that much value. So, the first part of it was, why do they seem indifferent? Well, many individuals, unfortunately, hide history. It's not just the Ahlul Sunnah, right? Sometimes we jump on them because we've lived Karbala all our lives, right? We've been hearing the story every year. Obviously, they haven't heard the story every year. And a lot of their scholars and their preachers, sometimes they don't know the story themselves, because when they're Sunni scholars, when they were students and they studied at their various seminaries or universities, wherever it was, like Saudi, for example, obviously they're not going to learn these stories. So if that's been retracted and taken away from their history books, that student who now is going to become an imam of the center, if he's never heard of it before, then what would cause him to tell anybody about it, right? And again, I don't want to kind of just put our finger down and point fingers at them. There's a lot of things in our own history that we don't know. Right? Usually when we learn our own deen, our own faith, it's typically only, a few times out of the year. Right? We might only end up coming to the center in the month of Muharram, in the month of Ramadan, and maybe for the Wiladat program or a Shahada program or some Eid Jashan, something like that. If that's going to be the only place we learn Islam, then our Islam is going to be very, very superficial. What do we expect to learn about a faith where our ulama spend 60, 70, 80, 90 years studying, right, in the Hawza? Various different subjects, becoming masters of that subject, have all this wealth of knowledge, and still when they write their books of tafsir or history or their fatwa, right, their fiqh books, akhlaq books, irfan books, philosophy books, whatever they write, they're saying, Wallahu a'lam, we don't know. We haven't done enough research yet. But then sometimes we say, well, how come nobody else knows these things? There's so many things that you and I don't know yet about our own faith, about our own history. How many things have we mentioned so far in our discussions, right, our Q&A, that we don't know? Like many people have been coming to me and said, I had no idea that's why we do wudu. I said, well, there's books translated in almost every language. How come we don't know? And again, we've mentioned over these past few nights why perhaps we don't know, because we're using the minbar, unfortunately, as a way to just make us feel good rather than become good. Right? We want to feel better rather than become better. So that we should use instead Muharram to make sure we transform and better ourselves. When we do that, if in your daily life you come across other individuals, whether they're Sunni, Christian, atheist, doesn't matter. If they see you at your workplace, at school, right, at Walmart, wherever it is, and they see that it's not just that you've changed your clothes and now you're wearing black once a year, not that just you're sadder. When they see that you're actually changing yourself every year, they themselves will ask, what are you doing? Why? I see something different in you. Tell me how I can get that too. And we know from the Imam's examples, that's the same thing. They live their lives through their examples, through their akhlaq. That's how people came to Islam. Especially how people first came to Islam as well with the Prophet. He's a Sadiq and an Amin. That was the main reason they came there. He didn't have to go around and tell everybody, okay, here's the proofs for God's existence and here's some other information about history. He didn't really do that for everybody. Most people came because of how he lived his life. So we have to learn from the Prophet, from the Ahlul Bayt, from our Imams, from our scholars, live like the Ahlul Bayt, live a Shi'i, a proper Muslim Islamic life, and naturally people will come to that same message. Next question. You mentioned we have to destroy our ego. What do you mean by ego? And in parentheses she put arrogance. Psychiatrists say the ego is a necessary part of us, that we need the ego in order to have and build self-esteem, self-respect, etc. Shouldn't we learn to regulate our ego instead of destroying it? How do the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam teach us to do that? This is a really wonderful question. So I don't want to get too much into Western psychology, but just a few points that we can understand. So modern psychology, or what they call psychoanalysis, right, or people who are psychoanalysts, is popularized by people like Sigmund Freud, right? I'm sure you've heard his name before. So Sigmund Freud broke down like 3 different parts, right? So he said that there is something called the id, something called the ego, and then something called the superego. And all 3 of these exist together. So the id is basically like the animal, carnal, lowest version of yourself, right? It pushes and just tells you things that you want, right? I want food, I want to live, I want money, right? Very, very lowly, animalistic things. Your superego, on the other side, is giving you a framework for how to live your life, right? What you would call morality, high-level traits, right? Being a good person, for example. And according to him, the ego is supposed to kind of regulate and balance the 2 and figure out, well, how can I get both of these in my life, right? How can I get these like food and things that I want, and how do I survive, which the id is telling me? And then also, how do I live a moral life according to what the superego is telling me? So all 3 things are there working together. Some Muslim psychologists and philosophers have tried to combine these ideas and compare them with Muslim psychology and spirituality, and they say the id is kind of like nafsul ammara, the lowest level, right? Is that the nafsul ammara is basically that version of ourselves, like the identity that we have that pushes us to do things which are like animals, right? Just our hawa, our desires, our low-based desires. Anything you want, just go after it, right? Like an animal. Then we have nafsul lawama, right? Nafsul lawama, sometimes they compare to the superego, right? The one that keeps us in check. Lawama means that you're regulating yourself, right? That you're questioning yourself, that you feel bad, you feel guilty when you do something wrong. And then, of course, at the highest level in the Islamic architecture, it has nafsul mutma'inna, the nafs that's at peace. It's moved beyond bad things. It's even moved beyond being guilty. It's at this state of peace where everything it's doing is just for the sake of Allah. The same way we were describing praying, right? We said sometimes people pray just to whatever, just because they have animalistic reasons, right? Just to get rid of their parents, or because of social or cultural pressures. Then somebody else at a higher level will do it because they want rewards, or they don't want punishments. But somebody at that highest level, they're doing it just for the sake of Allah, just because of that pleasure, right? That's nafsul mutma'inna. They have itminan, they have peace and tranquility. They enjoy what they're doing with their lives. So sometimes people translate ego as nafs. But our conceptualization of ego in Islam, or nafs, is not the same as Freud said, right? It's a different idea altogether. And again, I can't go into the details. If anybody is interested, and I know one of the questions on Slido was they were looking for recommendations for articles about Islamic psychology, articles, books, etc. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anything good yet in English, right? Most of the things you'll find in either Arabic or Farsi, right? And inshallah, there are people who are trying to translate some of them. If anybody wants the links, I can share them after the majlis tonight, inshallah. And then I don't know if we'll have time, if anybody again wants to, just for a few minutes, because it is a school night, we can discuss some of these points afterwards. Now, so when they're saying, shouldn't we learn to regulate our ego instead of destroying it? Again, it depends on which definition of ego you mean here. In the Islamic context, nafs, or ego, means your self-centeredness, your identity, yourself, that you are the center of the universe. So there's 2 concepts in Western kind of morality that open this up. So there's one thing called egotism, and then there's another thing called egoism. What's the difference? Egotism is basically arrogance, vanity, being conceited, thinking you're better than everybody else, right? It's people who use the word I constantly. You know, well, this is my car, this is my house, this is my project. I wrote a book, or I wrote this poetry. You know, I did this, I did that. You know, you see our ulama, they tried their best to never use these kinds of pronouns, right? They would always say something like we, or they would speak in the third person, right? They tried their best not to use I, or man, or me. Egoism, on the other hand, is about selfishness, being self-centered, and only caring about yourself. So a kind of modern day example of this are people who maybe they don't think they're better than everybody else, but they want attention constantly. So, you know, this is typically what social media feeds, right? So you might not think you're better than everybody else, but you constantly want attention. You're constantly sharing, you know, whatever, you're sharing on Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook, you know, whatever. You want everybody to understand and know what's going on in your life, right? You never want to be unattended to. You want all that focus in the spotlight to be on you. So that's why every little thing that happens in your life, you have to share, right? Oh, I got a, whatever, avocado smoothie with coconut milk and whatever. I got to share. I have to let everybody know. That's cool for you, great. I didn't really care, but whatever. That's wonderful, right? Or, you know, you have to have those people who, you know, take a picture. You know, somebody has to take it for them, obviously, right? Hopefully, I know there's some husbands who have to do that for their wives, right? Where they have to stand, so the sunset is in front of them. You know, they're looking at the sunset, and then some inspirational, like pseudo-inspirational quote, like, you know, don't chase your dreams, dreams will chase you, or some random nonsense like that. I don't know, right? So people just have to share as much as possible because they want all of that attention on them. So let me give a modern day example of egotism versus egoism. Egotism might be somebody who says, you know, my speeches are better than everybody else's. I can go over time in my speech because my words have a lot of value, right? So I'm going to go, I don't care if I'm supposed to end at this time, I'm going to keep going. An egoistic person might say, well, okay, it's not, I don't think my speech is better than anybody else. I don't think I'm a better speaker, but you know, I just want people to know that I'm a speaker, right? I just have to keep talking or put my stuff out on YouTube or, right, I don't know, take a selfie while I'm on the minbar. I don't know, right? What modern celebrity scholars do nowadays, right? Whatever they're doing. So another idea is somebody might say, you know, for example, for Azadari, as a poet or a reciter, I have a beautiful voice. I have a better voice than other people. I want them all to hear my voice. So I don't care what other people say. I'm going to go ahead and recite because they have to hear my wonderful, angelic, divine voice. Right? And again, they're probably not saying it out loud, right? They're saying it to themselves, of course. An egoistic person might say, well, I don't feel like my voice is better than anybody's, but I still need to recite. I don't care about rules. I don't care about who understands me. I don't care even if my voice is bad. I'm just going to recite and, you know, kind of to hell with anybody else, right? So we have to be careful of these things, right? These are both traits of having a nafsani way of thinking, an animalistic, dark way of thinking. If you make yourself the center of the universe, then God can never be the center of your universe. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Inshallah, we'll continue with the Q&A tomorrow night. We were discussing how we can refocus and reorient our lives so we have more ma'rifah, right? How we can get connected to Allah the same way that the Ahlul Bayt were. We said one way we can do that is by completely reorienting our lives, by reflecting on the blessings, the ni'mat, the barakat, everything that God's done for us. You know, this great life that we have, the fact that we exist, the fact that we breathe, the fact that every year we get to live the example and hear the examples in the fada'il and the examples of the Ahlul Bayt and their teachings. Okay, you reflect upon that, hopefully that'll change your life. Maybe it won't. Why not? Because maybe there's some doubts we have about Islam. Like maybe philosophical doubts, moral doubts, whatever. So we said the next thing that we need to do is try to answer these doubts. And we gave some key ingredients. We said one of them is a person has to have humility when they're researching. Don't come in as a Muslim and think that you know everything. I guarantee that even from an atheist you can learn something. You can learn something about yourself, you can learn something about your religion, your history, right? Never shut anybody out. So you have to have that humility, and we gave the examples and the characteristics that Imam Ali alayhi salam had mentioned in Nahjul Balagha, the qualities of a jahil person who thinks that they're actually an alim and a knowledgeable person. The last point we ended on last night was this idea of hubbud dunya, loving this world. The first thing we said was, the first problem with hubbud dunya is regarding being attached versus having dunya. Now, what does that mean? Can we have nice things? Can you have a nice car, nice clothes, nice cologne, perfume, whatever? Yes, you can have it all. as long as you're not attached, right? We gave this story of a Sufi Arif and some guy who started crying and got stressed out and anxious because he forgot his cloak at somebody's house, right? If you are ready to leave your things behind, that means you're not attached to them. But if you get anxious and stressed out over your phone or your car, or even azadari, things like this, they bother you a lot, right? You start to worry too much. Then this means that you're attached to them, that you're not willing to let things go, that you're thinking more about the dunya than you are the akhir. So we want to give more explanation on why this is a problem. Because somebody might say, okay, well, let's just say I'm attached to my phone. Let's say I check it or I'm on it, 23 hours out of the day. Well, how is that going to take away my ma'rifat from Allah? Why does hubb dunya, why does keeping materialistic ideas in my mind, why does that keep me away from Allah? Imam says, حرام على كل قلب مطوله بالدنيا أن يسكنه التقوى. It's haram for every single heart that is desiring and longing for the dunya. It's haram for that heart for taqwa to sit inside of it. Taqwa cannot rest inside and live inside of a heart if that heart is living and longing for the dunya. So this is the formula that Amir al-Mu'mineen is giving us. Think about, for example, because we want to talk about salah, right? We want to talk about prayers specifically. Why is it that sometimes our mind jumps other places when we're trying to pray, right? So right before we pray, maybe we're trying to connect to God, we want focus, and then maybe the first rakat we're okay. Maybe ruku, sujood, we're doing fine. Then we get up for the second one, and then all of a sudden something comes in our mind, right? Like, could be something stupid like, did I leave the stove on? Or, maybe some problem you're having at work comes in your mind. Or some issue that you didn't understand from your professor or your teacher, that comes in your mind right then. All those things you don't want to think about flood your mind at that instant while you're trying to pray and concentrate, right? Now, what's the reason for that? Again, one of the reasons is because we're so attached to the dunya. The dunya has got a hold on us. The dunya is saying that you want to be attached to me, fine, I'm going to stick around with you then. So when you try to run away from me, when you try to run back to Allah, I'm going to follow you then. You want to try to reconnect with God? Don't worry, I'm going to follow you, don't worry. So think about somebody who's a workaholic. Right? They have this, this story. I don't know. I've heard that it's a hadith, and I've also heard that it's just a story about a businessman who was praying in a Jamaat prayer. Regardless, it doesn't matter. So they say that there was a sheikh or person leading salah, and these people were following behind him. And one of them was some businessman. So after the prayer was over, the sheikh asked everybody. He said, I'm not sure. Did we pray 4 rakats or not? Like, did I skip a rakat? Like, I don't know if we did everything properly. He's like, I thought I missed one, or I cut one out, or I don't know if I messed up. So most of the other people, they weren't paying attention, so they were unsure. So the businessman said, no, you're fine, we did 4. He's like, how come you're sure but nobody else is? He's like, well, I know because the first rakat, I do my accounting for, I do my income. The second rakat, I usually do losses. He's like, third, I do family expenditures, and fourth, I deal with food. So he said, that's why I know we did all 4, right? So some people, they wait for salah so that they can start going through these things, right? And we can't blame somebody like that. For many of us who, let's say, don't know what we're saying in salah, in namaz, what are we supposed to do while we're praying? You're trying to connect with Allah. You're trying to say, okay, Allah, I want to talk to you. And then you say all these words, which, okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All right, maybe I know that. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay, that I know. And then maybe a few other ayat here and there. But then afterwards, we're kind of at a loss. Like if I got up on the minbar, okay, Farsi, if I spoke in Farsi, a bunch of you would understand. Arabic, many of you would understand. Urdu, same thing. But if I started speaking Cantonese or something, then you'd all be done with, right? How would you connect with me? Okay, I'd say the word Hussein once in a while, you'd say, okay, yeah, subhanAllah, that's great. Okay, but that's it. So obviously, if we don't know the language, it's going to be a problem. So one of the best ways to connect back to that, to connect to Allah, to connect to the prayer, you have to know what you're saying. And I know another problem, of course, is that sometimes the translations you find for the surahs or the salah in general, like what you say in ruku and what we say in sujood, it's like this old, weird Shakespearean English that, how am I going to connect with, glory be to thee, O my almighty Lord? Like, what am I going to connect with that? Like, we don't want our salah to be like we're reading Romeo and Juliet, right? We don't want that. So sometimes, and I think it's a duty of those who know Arabic well enough, and they also have a good command of the English language, but they can write it in easy to read English. Like when we're saying Alhamdulillah, Okay, all praise be to God. What does that really mean? So sometimes a translation is not good enough. That's where tafsir has to come in the picture. So if you really want to connect, read tafsir, especially for the surahs. Right? So Surah Fatiha, we don't have an excuse. Every language I know a tafsir has been done from all different levels, right? Easy tafsirs and very difficult tafsirs. Like Alamat Tabatabai's Tafsir al-Mizan has been translated in almost every language. So I don't think we have an excuse. It's a very, very difficult tafsir to read, but it gives you a lot of depth and it'll make you understand. Inshallah, what we'll do maybe tomorrow night or maybe the next night is we'll mention a few of these things. So we might start with, for example, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What is some things we can keep in mind when we say that? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات
اللهم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. I'll give you a more personal example, right? So let's say I'll be trying to offer my salam. And when I'm doing that, let's say, whatever, earlier in the day or yesterday, or actually probably happened a few days ago. So I'll be trying to pray, and then in my mind, I'll be like, okay, I need some ideas for tonight's speech. So all those ideas will keep popping in my mind, but I won't be able to concentrate. So sometimes things that are sitting in the back of our mind, which we are more attached to than Allah, they creep up right there, right? So you could be a workaholic, like in this case, I wouldn't consider this work necessarily, but again, that creeps up in your mind, right? My points for the speech will come into my mind then. If, let's say, you were watching TV or you're watching a movie, that happens to me sometimes too, right? Like, whatever, I mentioned Infinity War the other day too, right? So, let's say I just watched it, so I'll be reading namaz, I'll be praying, and then some idea about, okay, well, why was Thanos two different colors in the early Marvel movies, and then he was a lighter purple later on, right? Like, random thoughts just come in my mind. Why? Because I was too attached to the dunya. I didn't do anything haram, but every little piece of the dunya that you have, that's going to sit in your heart. Every single little thing. Let me give another story to kind of help us understand now why this is really going to push us away from Allah. So there's this famous story through poetry that Rumi tells. So I'm going to paraphrase it, right? So in our country over here, in most Western countries, the stores that exist like Walmart, Target, Costco, whatever, you can get just about anything that you need, right? All right, you need a laundry basket, you can find it. You need a TV, you can get it. Avocados, I don't know why I'm saying avocados so much. I think I need avocados, right? Like, you get everything you need in one spot. Right? The benefits of the consumerist, capitalistic Western world. Alhamdulillah. But when you go to other places, like Iran, right? In Iran, sometimes you might find stores that have everything, like it's superi, but usually you don't have everything there. So what happens, you have to go to one specific area, and then all those kind of items are all in that one spot. So if you need to, let's say, get an oil change or your tire change, there's one specific area in Qom, for example, that you have to go where all the mechanics are. If you need to buy a motorcycle helmet, just the helmet, not the motorcycle, just the helmet, it's on the other side of town somewhere else, where the guy sells only helmets. Okay, now if you have to get, let's say, itar, or atar, or perfume or whatever, or cologne, that's some other guy, let's say, on one street, right? That's where all the perfume, itar, and atar sellers are. So that's the way certain countries are, like Iran. So the way Rumi's telling the story, it's keeping that in mind, right? So on this one street, there's a bazaar with people who are just selling fragrances, perfumes, and colognes. So what happens is one day, again, when somebody sells these kinds of things, when they are an expert, right? They're a real salesman in their field. Their nose, especially for somebody who's selling fragrances, colognes, whatever, their nose is like attuned, right? They're like a specialist. So another analogy would be for somebody who works in jewelry. If you take, let's say, a ring to somebody who's a jeweler, they can tell you from a mile away whether that's a fake stone or a real stone, right? So somebody who's into perfume, they can tell whether something's mixed or it's fake or whatever, right? So their noses are very, very sensitive, right? They're honed, they're attuned. So Rumi says in this poetry that one day, somebody comes through the bazaar, comes through the street on their horses. And the horses decide to leave a little bit of najasa on their way out, right? So they leave that najasa, and then all the perfume people, right, they say, okay, we got to clean this up. So one guy says, okay, you clean it up. He said, no, I'm not cleaning it up, you clean it up. And then they start arguing, right? Nobody wants to clean it up. So they say, you know what, let's just hire some other person to come and do that. but the smell was so bad that nobody else would come and do it. So one wise person was like, listen, there's one individual who I can call who will come and take care of everything. Like, okay, fine. So now these perfume salesmen, they couldn't stand it, right? They had to keep their mouths covered, they had to keep away, they just couldn't handle it. This one individual comes with no problem at all, right? Just walks in casually, what's your problem? And they say, that little thing that's over there, right? Like, okay. So he comes, he cleans it up, and he walks out with no problem. Doesn't need to cover his mouth. He doesn't, puke, doesn't even dry heave, nothing. So the moral of the story is what? Like, how was he able to do that, but the perfume fragrance sellers weren't? Because those perfume fragrance cologne sellers, their noses were used to beautiful fragrances. This other individual was used to dealing with that kind of stuff, right? When you're used to that kind of stuff, then that same person, when he's in that area of fragrances and perfumes, that's when he starts going, this is disgusting, right? That it's a really strong smell I'm getting from here. He can't handle perfume, but he can handle poop, right? The same thing happens to us when we get attached to the dunya. The more haram music you listen to, or the more even halal music you listen to, the more movies and TV, the more work we're doing, everything that's not God and not godly is going to take place in your heart, so that anything else that's godly and divine, it's going to smell like poop to you. That's what's going to happen. So even though anything that's religious and divine and good for you is actually supposed to have a good fragrance, we won't be able to smell that. And based on this, we have this story when Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he's confronting the army of Umar ibn Sa'd, when he's in front of them and he's trying to have a conversation and a dialogue, saying, don't you know who I am? You guys are Muslims, you know the Quran, you know that I'm from the Ahlul Bayt, you know that I'm the grandson of the Prophet. Why, and sometimes we question, how is it that people, some of them who had invited the Imam from Kufa, they invited the Imam to come, but they're fighting against him right now. And Imam says these beautiful words, قَدْ مُلِيَتْ فِي بُطُونِكُمْ حَرَامٌ. Because your stomachs are filled with haram. And then there's two different explanations for this the ulama give. One is that they were used to eating haram food, and that could be like things that they shouldn't have been eating. Another meaning is that they were overeating. Another meaning is that haram things were entering into their spirit. When we sit there and listen to ghiba happening and we don't stop, that's haram entering into our system. When we're watching, again, movies or listening to music, it messes with our system. You know how sometimes you have, let's say, people who are used to listening to music and things like that, right? Even if it's halal music. Sometimes, let's say, they're in a place, like in somebody's car, and they try to listen to Quran or manqabat or something more religious. They're like, turn that off. I don't like the way that sounds. In the other narrations, we say that that's because these shayateen have come in their ears and blocked away things like the Quran, have blocked away things like hadith. Sometimes people, their initial reaction when they hear a verse of the Quran or they hear a hadith, they're like, that's nonsense. That's for people who lived back 1400 years ago. What does that have to do with us today? Before even researching, before even stopping and being humble, they shut it down right away. Why? Because their system is filled with haram stuff. And again, on a spiritual level, that means they're filled with non-godly, non-divine things. They're filled with dunya. When you fill yourself with dunya, you don't leave room for taqwa, as Imam said. You don't leave room for God. It's either dunya or akhirah. You don't get to have a fill of both. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now I know some of you might say, but don't we say we want dunya and akhirah? Like, yes, of course. As I mentioned before, you can have dunya as long as you don't have the attachment. So now we need some solutions here. So what if I'm attached to something? How do I break away? So one is, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Don't get attached. Break away from these attachments. Right? Now, if I tell you not to have a smartphone, nobody's going to listen to me, obviously, right? Because I know we're all attached. And if I say get rid of it and get just a simple, like, old Nokia, nobody's going to bother doing that. Okay, fine. We have to be reasonable. There are certain things in our lives that we probably could cut out. Things that we are attached to that we can step by step, gradually start cutting down in our lives. And there's a kind of method that some of our ulama have given us, right? And where you can take something that you really, really enjoy and you make it less enjoyable for yourself, right? Because you're trying to spiritually improve. So Imam Khomeini, rahmatullah alayh, there's this interesting story about him. They say that he really loved watermelon. So he was sitting down once with a bowl of watermelon, and somebody had come to visit him, sit down with him, and discuss something with him. So as they sat down, now the person sat, they see this bowl of watermelon, and they're expecting Imam Khomeini to offer pieces, right? Obviously, right? We're waiting for the ta'aruf. And it's not happening. He's not offering any pieces. So the person's trying to be a little patient, but he realizes that, okay, maybe he's got some secret. He's like, okay, I gotta find out. So he asks him, okay, I know that you're a person who's always trying to do service and khidmat for other individuals. Why didn't you offer me this piece of watermelon? He's like, no, I'm sorry, go ahead, you can have some. I didn't think you would like it. He's like, oh, okay. So he takes a piece, he takes a bite, and basically spits it out. He's like, why is it so salty? He's like, because my nafs, my ego, my identity, I'm really attached to watermelon. I really like it. And I don't like that quality myself. So in order to fight that, I started putting salt on watermelon so that I would get detached from it. Now, how many of us could do something like that? For example, if you were, let's just say, a chai addict, right? You're addicted to tea, which I'm sure are 95% of you in the room, right? If that's the case, would you be willing to do something like, okay, no sugar, instead I'll start adding salt or something to my chai, or to start breaking out the habit? I know some of you are saying, absolutely not, I'll never do that, right? But again, the point is, if you have addictions in your life, there are steps you could take to at least reduce it a little bit. Now you might say, okay, Hasan, I'm not going to do that. Give me a more practical tip. Fine, I can give you one more practical tip, inshallah. You can send a salawat ala Muhammad. Okay. So you say, listen, I'm not going to just get rid of movies. I'm not going to get rid of loud music. I can't cut out caffeine. I'm still going to take selfies everywhere I go. Sorry. Okay, if you can cut it down, good. That'll be one step. And then what if you say that, no, I can't cut it down, right? I'm still going to be attached to them. Or even if you do cut it down, what's the kind of next step you can take? The next step is something that we had mentioned in 2016 as well, for those who want to refer to that discussion. It's this. For every single thing you do in your life, ask yourself, how can I connect this back to God? Every single action in your life, how do I make this more tawheedi? How do I make it more Islamic, quote unquote? Let me give an example. Let's say some of you are hookah and shisha smokers, right? So there are some individuals who know that, again, it might not be a healthy habit, and it might not even be an encourageable thing to do, but they do it. So some of them, in order to make sure that there's some bit of God in there, they make sure before they take that first puff, or for every puff, they say out loud, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, if you saw that, you'd probably laugh, like, that's funny. But this person's really trying to reconnect with God, even in something small like that. Or imagine somebody who, again, we're talking about movies. Before you go to the movies, or before you load up Netflix, or before you start playing a game, say to yourself, either to yourself or out loud. Out loud's better, but even if it's to yourself, just say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah, I'm not sure how this has to do with my spiritual growth. I know that maybe this is not the best thing for me right now, but if you can make me benefit from this thing in some way, I'd appreciate it, right? It would be nice. So I gave some examples of how you can do that with movies, right? Even in movies, you can ask moral and philosophical questions, right? I guarantee you, whoever wants to sit down, I can do a tafsir of every Marvel and DC movie, right? I have no problem doing that. Inshallah, maybe that's a series we can do next year. And in New Jersey, we did the same thing for Interstellar, right? Christopher Nolan movies are really good for that. Anyway, so I don't want to make a whole movie series right now. But movies can have that effect. Or you can even do book discussions. Even if, let's say, you're a Harry Potter fan, which I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of this Jadoo and black magic stuff, but whatever. If you want to get into that, that's your thing. So even if you can take things like that and make it more religious. Again, just at least sing Bismillah, or see, God, can I get some lesson out of this? Can you make sure I improve just by doing these things? Before you listen to halal music, ideally, every single thing you do, if you can start with the Bismillah, hopefully, inshallah, Allah will see your true, pure niyat, and that should change your life just a little bit. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. And tomorrow, inshallah, we'll start to go through some of these meanings, if we get time, of things like Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. How can we incorporate that in our lives more so than just repeating some words in Arabic that we really don't understand what it means, like in the name of God? Yeah, but what really does it mean? So inshallah, we'll try to explore that a little more. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. On the night Ashura, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam had gathered his companions, and he was telling them that tomorrow all of you will become shaheed. So he was showing the station in heaven for all the different shuhada. So for example, he would go to Abbas. He'd say that this is your station in heaven. He'd go to Zuhair and so show him this is what you will have in heaven. He'd go to Akbar, etc. Every single person he would go to and show them this is what is awaiting for you in heaven. They say, according to some, that Qasim had come running to his uncle and said, Ya Amma, will I also be able to become shaheed tomorrow? Am I going to be killed as well? Now, some of us might think that, no, Qasim, he was a little bit older, according to some, than Awan and Muhammad, right? Some say that maybe 12 or 13, maybe 15. But still, how many people that age are asking questions like that? You know, will I die tomorrow? Will I become shaheed as well? We might be thinking maybe Qasim asked it because he was scared and he wanted to make sure he could save his life. So, and maybe Imam wanted to show us that that wasn't the case. So he asked that question to Qasim. He says, Qasim, my beautiful nephew, Wanayya, you tell me, كيف الموت عندك? Tell me, what do you think about death? When you think about death, what's in your mind? And he says these beautiful, wonderful words. أحلى من الناس. It's sweeter to me than honey. So when youth ask for examples, look at Qasim. This is an example of somebody who's saying that me giving my life up to defend my Imam, to fight and save Islam, that's sweeter to me than honey. This is what we should be having as goals for youth. And as parents, this is the goal for our parenting and raising our children. But they say Qasim still wanted to know. He says, tell me, will I be martyred as well? Will I become shaheed or not? And he says, Ya Qasim, even my Alul Asghar will become shaheed tomorrow. Ajrukum ala Allah. And Qasim's thinking that, no, Ya Ammu, Ya Amma, are you saying that they're going to come into the tents and attack Alul Asghar? Is that what you're saying? You know, do you think Hussein had it within him to say that, no, Qasim, they won't come into the tents and kill Asghar? Asghar will be killed because I bring him out tomorrow. Hussein doesn't have it in his heart to know this. Now on the afternoon of Ashura, Asr time comes, everyone is going out and fighting in the battle, and Qasim is watching one by one. His family, his friends are all going and fighting. They say that when Awan and Muhammad got ijaza, this gave Qasim, according to some, this gave him that same push to go and ask for permission as well. And they say he came and asked for permission. And when he did, Imam turned away. He said, no, I can't give you permission. They say Qasim began kissing his uncle Hussein. He said, please, Ammu, give me permission, let me go tomorrow, let me go. He began kissing his hands. He said, no, I can't let you go, Bunayya, my sweet nephew, I can't let you go. He fell down on the floor, began kissing the feet of his uncle Hussein, saying, please, please let me go. He said, no, I can't let you go. Now Qasim's heart is broken. All he wanted to do was go out and fight and join everyone else. Now what does somebody do? What does a child do when their heart is broken? Who do they run to when they don't get their wishes fulfilled? Qasim runs back to his mother, Farwa, and he complains as a child complains to his mother. He's like, Amma, I want to go out and fight, but Hussein's not letting me go. Now imagine the feeling that's in Farwa's heart right now, in her mind. She's thinking, who am I to go ask Hussein to let Qasim go? I don't have the same position as Zainab. I'm not his sister. The same way that she was able to get permission for on Muhammad, I can't come to Hussein like that. What am I supposed to do? So they say that she became anxious, she became stressed out, and she realized that she had no solution, she had no way, and go ahead for this. And then she remembered what her husband had told her. She remembered that Imam Hasan told her that when you find yourself one day in extreme difficulty, when you don't find a solution for yourself, I'm leaving you behind these two things. Open them up and you'll find your solution then. They say that she opened up this treasure chest. She found 2 letters inside. One was addressed to Qasim and herself, and the other one was addressed to Hussein. When they opened up the letter, Qasim and Farwa began reading together that this last conversation of father to son. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya Qasim, Ya Bunayya. I won't be able to defend my brother at Karbala. I won't be there for him. You will be my wakil, you will be my representative at Karbala. My brother will be surrounded. Your uncle will be surrounded by the enemies on all sides. You need to sacrifice yourself to protect him because I won't be able to do that. Now Qasim is filled with tears, not tears of sadness, but tears of joy. He takes this letter, the second one addressed for Imam Hussein. He runs to the camp, back to Imam. They say that Imam immediately smelled something in the air. He says, this is a smell that I haven't smelled in many years. What is this fragrance that I smell? Then he sees the letter, he sees the handwriting, he doesn't need to see the name. He says, this is my beloved brother Hasan. He starts to read it. Bismillah, Ya Akhi, Ya Akha, Ya Hussein. Don't stop my Qasim on this day from fighting for you. I won't be there to protect you, so I'm leaving my Qasim as my wakil. I'm leaving him on my behalf. Now imagine, this is not a request from an older brother to a younger brother. This is a request from an imam to his ma'moon, to his follower. This is a final request from Hussein Imam. And maybe this is when he's remembering, La yawmaka yawmaka ya Aba Abdullah. So finally Hussein gives him ijazah. Abbas begins getting him ready for battle. Qasim goes out and he begins to fight valiantly. But of course the Mal'un, they attack him from all sides. When they see him, some of the enemies see that it seems like the full moon is coming out to attack us. How can we destroy a beautiful young boy like this? One person, one Mal'un from the side of Umar ibn Sa'd says, by Allah, I swear to Allah that I will destroy this boy and I will hit him so hard that it'll break the chest of Hussein. He takes a long and tough iron rod. He sneaks up behind Qasim. He swings the rod and breaks the spine of Qasim. He breaks his spine, and when Qasim feels that pain, he falls off of his horse. And now when he falls off of his horse, he begins screaming, Ya Amma Adari. Mu'mineen, there's one last part to the story which makes Qasim different than every other shaheed in Karbala. You know that every other shaheed, when they were calling out to Hussein, when they were calling Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, alaykum mini akhir salam, when Abbas was calling out Ya Akhi, Ya Akha, Ya Mawla, when everyone was calling out, Hussein came running to them while they were still alive. But they say Qasim, when he was calling out Ya Amma, Ya Ammu, Adirikni, they say that his voice was getting softer and softer as he was saying it, and that Hussein and Abbas couldn't hear his voice anymore. Because when they finally reached his body, they saw that in all of the chaos, the horses had run in every direction and began trampling the body of Qasim. And Qasim is the only shaheed of Karbala who was trampled while he was still alive. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad to forgive all mu'mineen, mu'minat, muslimin, muslimat. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Qasim ibn Hasan to help us who are youth, to become and follow in the footsteps of Qasim, to have that same ma'rifat and understanding of Allah, to be able to defend Islam and defend the Imam of our time the same way Qasim was able to. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Qasim ibn Hasan, us who are parents, help us raise our children in the same way that Aun and Muhammad and Qasim were raised. Ya Allah, we ask you by the right of Qasim ibn Hasan to make us a supporter of our Imam the same way that he was a supporter and defender of his Imam. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya
کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا 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 ٹوٹ پکتا ہوا پاس کا پرچم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا جیسے جیسے میرے غازی کا علم جھکتا گیا جیسے جیسے میرے غازی کا علم جھکتا گیا عشق میں حضرت شبیر کے بھی غم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا ٹوٹ پکتا ہوا باز کا پرچم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا دیکھ لے اسلام بچانے کے لیے کربلا دیکھ لے اسلام بچانے کے لیے ہاتھ کندے کو لیے وارث آدم آیا خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا ظالموں اس کو دو بوند پلا دو پانی ظالموں اس کو دو بوند پلا دو پانی اب لبوں پر میرے بے شیر کے ہے دم آیا خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا سارے موسم تو گزر جاتے ہیں آ گئی لیکن سارے موسم تو گزر جاتے ہیں آ گئی لیکن بس ہمیشہ کے لیے موسم ماتم آیا خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا جیسے جیسے میرے غازی کا علم جھکتا گیا جیسے جیسے میرے غازی کا علم جھکتا گیا عشق میں حضرت شبیر کے بھی غم آیا خون ٹپکتا ہوا عباس کا پرچم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا کربلا والوں پہ یہ کیسا محرم آیا حسین 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 Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hazrat Qasim, 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 Ya Hazrat Qasim. قرآن حسن مایه ایثار حسینی بگرفته به کفدار و خریدار حسینی از کودکی پیش گرفتار حسینی افسوس که صد باره شد از تیغ تن تو یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم.
ای خورده اصل از دم شمشیر شهادت ای یافته در مکتب ایثار ولادت با آنکه بود در نفست روح عبادت لبریز خوناب گلو شد دهن تو یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم.
افسوس که چون ناله به تیغت همه چیدم افسوس که پهلوی تو با نیزه دریدم افسوس که بر کشتن تو تیغ کشیدند افسوس که افتاد خزان در چمن تو یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم.
ای کرده امو مثل پدر گریه برایت ای گفته امو جان امونت به فدایت ای وجلگه شادی تو بزم عزایت ای خلعت شادی تو بر تن کفن تو یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم
یا حضرت قاسم.
یک کشته صدبار تن و این همه قاتل یک کشته صدبار تن و این همه قاتل بر اسم خونین حسن ناله کن ای دل بر اسم خونین حسن ناله کن ای دل والله و دهر عمو داغ تو مشکل مثل جگر پاک حسن شد بدن تو یا
حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم یا حضرت قاسم.
حسین ابا عبدالله حسین ابا عبدالله
حسین ابا عبدالله حسین ابا عبدالله حسین ابا عبدالله حسین ابا عبدالله حسین ابا عبدالله حسین ابا عبدالله.
یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین.
बाबा बन रहा नसीब तेरे ने 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 दुल्ले मेहंदी दे नाल सहरे ने दुल्ले मेहंदी दे नाल सहरे ने बाबा बन रहा नसीब तेरे ने बाबा बन रहा नसीब तेरे ने बाबा बन रहा नसीब तेरे ने। अर्श वालों बारात कासिम ने
والو بارات قاسم نے لائے جنگ ناچ آ کے ڈیرے نے لائے جنگ ناچ آ کے ڈیرے نے بابا بن رہا صاحب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا صاحب تیرے نے لولے مہدی دے نال سہرے نے لولے مہدی دے نال سہرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے میرے ویرن دی تو نشانی ہے میرے ویرن دی تو نشانی ہے ٹکڑے میرے نے میرے ٹکڑے ٹکڑے میرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابے مہدی دے نال سہرے نے دلے مہدی دے نال سہرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے میں ہوں بن ریدا واقعہ پڑھدا تے جائیں خون دی مہندی لائی جن دی لاش انوکھے رنگ دے وچ وہ شارت اتوں اٹھائی تے جن دی امڑی پوچھیا میرا کن گئے قاسم تے شاہ گنڈڑی کھول وکھائی جدہ منہ بچڑے دا ہے وہ چمن لگی وہ تصویر نظر نہ آئی بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے روکے گبران وین کیتا ہے وین کیتا ہے دکھی جگ کو نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے دلے مہدی دے نال سہرے نے دلے مہدی دے نال سہرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے بابا بن رہا نصیب تیرے نے یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین دیکھو نا ادھر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دل توڑ کے رکھ دے گا وہ درد گرا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نائی کر بابا سینے میں سنا ہے دیکھو نائی کر जुदाई को मुश्किल है बहुत सहना जो बीत गई मुझ पर मास नहीं कहना साबिर है बहुत लेकिन साबिर है बहुत लेकिन हाँ फिर भी वो माँ है सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है देखो ना इधर बाबा सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है क्या तुमसे कहूँ बाबा एक सांस भी मुश्किल है टूटा है जहान ऐसा बस मेरा वही दिल है ये दिल तो मेरे बाबा ये दिल तो मेरे बाबा सुगरा का मकान है सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है देखो ना इधर बाबा सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है मौका जो अजल दे दे एक लम्हा सुकून पाऊं चेहरे की जियारत को महरूम न रह जाऊं धुंधलाता है हर मंजर धुंधलाता है हर मंजर हर चीज धुआं है सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है देखो ना इधर बाबा सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है सरवर ने कहा बेटा चाल है बतलाओ टूटी है कहाँ बरछी इस बाप को दिखलाओ अकबर ने कहा बाबा अकबर ने कहा बाबा ये हाथ जहाँ है सीने में सिना है सीने में सिना है देखो ना इधर बाबा सीने में सिना है या हुसैन
حسنینی و پریشان شده جمع حسنینی و پریشان شده جمع حسنینی و پریشان شده در حال خون خیال پنهان شده در حال خون خیال پنهان شده از نغمه پرپر شدنت معلوم است از نغمه پرپر شدنت معلوم است که دستخوش حمله طوفان شده که دستخوش حمله طوفان شده بر خاک بودی نهال بودی اکنون بر خاک بودی نهال بودی اکنون بر خاک قد سر به فرمان شده این جنگ که جنگ نیزه و شمشیر است این جنگ که جنگ نیزه و شمشیر است ای آینه اسب سنگ باران شده قرآن حسن قرآن حسن قرآن حسن جز بی بلکه صد پاره چو پاهای قرآن شده صد پاره چو پاهای قرآن شده آخر چه به روز بدنت آوردم از چیست که هم سطح بیابان شده این سینه آسیا شده میگوید این سینه آسیا شده میگوید
بازیچه نهرهای اسمان شده بازیچه نهرهای اسمان شده کبوترانه از این خاک ها رها شده ای کبوترانه از این خاک ها رها شده ای برای درد یتیمی خود دوا شده ای تو بود باز رویت خواب و میبینم چقدر مثل جوانی مشتبا شده ای چقدر مثل جوانی مشتبا شده ای پس از صدای نفس‌های مانده در سینه پس از صدای ترک‌ها که بی صدا شده ای تو دست زیر تنت بردم ولی خالیست جدا شدی ز من از بس جدا شده ای جدا شدی ز من از بس جدا شده ای عمو حسین بیا ببین به خاک و خون نشسته‌ام عمو حسین بیا ببین به استخوان شکسته‌ام عمو حسین بیا ببین به خاک و خون نشسته‌ام عمو حسین بیا ببین به استخوان شکسته‌ام عمو حسین عمو حسین عمو حسین عمو حسین بیا ببین به خاک و خون نشسته‌ام عمو حسین بیا ببین به استخوان شکسته‌ام عمو حسین بیا ببین به استخوان شکسته‌ام یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین اللهم صل علی محمد.
I want to request each one of you to become a member of the Unity Center. Please become a member of the Unity Center, because once we know how many Mu'min are here, then we can make our programs. We have offered a new center from inshallah next year. We will be in a new center 3 miles from here. We have to come up with some deficits. I will ask Brother Freddy to come and tell us a little bit about that financial. But become members. Make your from your bank, make a monthly transfer, whatever, $1,500, so that, our center has to run through this. Ladies are doing very good job, making the work, for the whole year. If you don't want to pay for the center, pay for your own self, the paper products which we have, it's $90, Mr. Hasan has requested that each family please pay $90 to her and write down this is for paper products. So for the rest of the year, just let's do that. I asked Dr. Fahmy to tell us about the new center.
Just asked me, so but I just want to remind you, you received the update from the Unity Center about our new center, and you see that we are buying the purchase price of $776,000, and we are collected so far $650,000. So we're still short of close to $130,000. So you guys need to reach out to your friends, relatives, out of state, out of town. Every bit, little bit, everything helps. And we next month inshallah is the closing date around October 20th and 28th, and we're expanding to find some loans. Even if somebody can give us a loan, we prefer donations. But if any form of help, the loans, donation, we need that. Second thing I want to remind you is this. Every night you're coming here, you see this beautiful programming. This programming is only supported with your support. We cannot do this without your support. The Sheikh comes here with 13 nights, he gives all beautiful speeches, he answers every day your questions, your concerns, and he's there for helping you to uplift yourself spiritually in your daily life, in non-spiritual life, everything. So please, we need your support. We cannot run this without your support. Chacha mates at work outside on the desk. And you can write anyone. Don't feel shy. Somebody wrote $500. I can't do that. You can write $50, $100, $20, whatever you can do. Please do anything. Do write something. Do give something, and it helps us. And it never get shy. Like I don't want to write big amount. And $10 is a big amount. Maybe your $10
is far much bigger than my, let's say, my $200 or my 500,000, my $1,000. So you never underestimate whatever the amount you write from the sincerity of your heart. It counts and it helps us. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and inshallah we will be forward the next couple nights. The last speech is still Saturday, and for the Sheikh, and we're gonna inshallah fly out on Sunday morning. And the big night, Thursday is the day of Ashura. We have all day off. And Thursday night, Wednesday night is the Muharram night. We're gonna have a little bit longer programming. It's a very important night, very significant night.
Shabi Ashur is the 10th night, not the day starts when the sun
In night, the Shabi Ashur starts at Wednesday night. After Maghrib, the Shabi Ashur starts. Yeah, the Tuesday is the day of Ashura. That's the most saddest day in the history of the world. And inshallah, we look forward to all the inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam wa laka as-salam wa ilayka ya'udu as-salam. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiy wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Assalamu ala al-a'immati al-hadin al-mahdiyyin. Assalamu ala jami' anbiya Allah wa rusulihi wa malaikatihi. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi as-salihin. Assalamu ala aliyin amir al-mu'minin. Assalamu ala Fatimah az-Zahra Sayyidat Nisa al-Alamin. Assalamu ala al-Hasan wal-Husayn Sayyida Shabab Ahli al-Jannah ajma'in. Assalamu alayka ya Abu Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifnawik. Alayka minni salamullah abadan wa baghit wa baghiya al-layl wa an-nahar. ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على محمد بن علي باقر النبيين. السلام على جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام على موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام على علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام على محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام على علي بن محمد الحادي. السلام على الحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري. السلام على الحجة بن الحسن الغام المهدي. أجعل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم قل لوليك الحجة الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة في كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا معينا حتى تسكن أرضك طوعا وتمتع فيها طويلا.
रब्बे जहाँ पंत ने पाक का सदका इस कौम का दामन गम शबीर से भर दे. बच्चों को ताकर अली असगर का तबस्सुम दुल्हों को हबीब इब्न मुजाहिर की नजर दे. कमसिन को मिला वलाए ओन मोहम्मद हर एक जुमा को अली अकबर का जिगर दे. माओं को अताकर सानी जहरा का सलीका बहनों को सकीना की दुआओं का असर दे. मुफिस्त ज़ोलालो जवाहिर की वो बारिश मकरूज का हर कर्ज अदा गैब से कर दे. जो दीन के काम आए वो औलाद अता कर जो मल्ली से शब्बीर की खातिर वो भर दे. मुला तुझे ज़ैनब के सीरी की कसम है बेजुर्म मसीहों को रिहाई की खबर दे. कम कोई ना दे हमको सिवाय गम शब्बीर शब्बीर का गम बांट रहा है तो दर्द दे. जान जाती है तो बेशक चली जाए अब्बास के परचम पे कभी आशा जान जाती है तो बेशक चली जाए अब्बास के परचम पे कभी आशा
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद
Family can answer. So we were just wondering because we're going to do tomorrow the
क्या बाहर आई अच्छा
previous schedule that I had was Abdul Akbar, फिर Abbas, फिर Ali Asghar.
जी जी हजरत ये बात ये लिखा हुआ ये इनको मेरा ख्याल ये मैंने 6 साल पहले देखा तो मुझे ही उन्होंने वापस दी कि तुमने लिखी दी उसी को फॉलो कर रहे हैं अल्लाह का शुक्र है सही यस 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 हजरत यही बात
السلام علیکم ببخشید من یه سوال دارم این خانوما که اینجا اقامت میبندن بعضی اینجوری میکنن گفتم من از شما خانم خودشون فرمودن که بپرسیم از آقا آیا خانوم‌ها و آقایون من اینو میدونم که مال آقایون اینجوریه یه خود باز دستشون مال خانوما بسته تره حالا گفتم از شما سوال کنید
واسه تکبیر تو احرام
برای ببینید تکبیر مثلا شما چیزی میبندید میگه الله اکبر یه خانومی هست اینجا اینجوری میکنه میگه نه باید اینجوری باشه
من انشاءالله فکر کنم فردا چون موضوع ما تکبیر تو احرام میشه اونجا من خواستم توضیح بدم انشاءالله که چجوری باید
بپرسم بهشون می‌خواستم بگم
اگر فردا تشریف میارید توضیح میدم انشاءالله
حالا این مال خانوماست یا
اون فرق بین خانم ها و آقاها من میخوام دوباره بررسی کنم من
بررسی کنم پس بررسی
آره انشاءالله
تشکر میکنم خیلی ممنون
خواهش میکنم
She has some questions regarding magic. Yes, you can.
Okay, so what's the question? If you know that she doesn't want to ask, you can ask her on behalf. It's okay. If you don't want to say it, should be I can help. Okay. So you follow Ayatollah Sistani, I think, right? You said this, yeah. So basically, there's a few things you have to figure out. One, there is halal and haram music, right? There's a difference. So there's obvious things too, like if in the music there's like haram messages, right? Like it's telling you, again, example, let's say there's lyrics there that are saying don't believe in God, or murder, or just doing haram things. That's obviously not allowed, right? If the music itself is something that it's known for places that, so let's say that music is specific for like haram places and haram gatherings, right? I don't want to give you examples because it's up to you to decide what that is. I can't tell you what that is. So, well, I'll give you. How many things am I getting, man? So, let's just, for example, right? let's say there's a person that has, I don't know, I'm trying to give okay, I'll give you this side. So you tell me, classical music, right? Like Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, things like that. What do you think about that kind of music? It's halal or haram? Halal or haram? I couldn't hear you. Haram? Why? You don't know? Okay. So, if you think that that music is meant to take people like away from God, if the messages are like haram, like irreligious messages, and if you think that when they play that kind of music, it's meant for haram gatherings, like people sit around, listen to classical music and whatever, I don't know, do haram stuff, for example, then that song would be haram, or that music would be haram. So somebody, again, I'm not telling you what to believe, it's up to you to do your own research and to think for yourself. What do average people think about classical music? Somebody might say, for example, that no, classical's fine because there's no messages, there's no lyrics, there's nothing haram there. People play it normally in, let's say, elevators or things like that. There's not like they don't play it at like a concert or a club or a bar, things like that, right? Somebody could say, no, that's fine. But again, that's up to you to decide. So those are the criteria. So the criteria is if there's haram messages, that's a no-no. If it's meant for haram gatherings, that's also not going to be allowed to. Does that make sense? Okay, so for singing, if the voice that you use, the type of singing you do, is again, same rules apply. If it's the type of singing which is trying to take people away from Allah and take away from Islam and religion and stuff like that, that kind of singing is not allowed. If it's going to cause people to think more about the dunya and things like that, that wouldn't be allowed as well. So again, that's up for you to decide what kind is not. Like, let me give you an example. Let's say the way that somebody recites Adhan or Quran. If let's say they started reciting it in the same way that it was like I'm trying to think. They started reciting it like I don't know, like Lady Gaga or something like that, right? Like one of her songs. Then you would know that, no, that sounds weird. That sounds like some haram music, basically, right? So even reciting Quran and Adhan like that is haram. You can't use that same kind of tone. So you have to figure out what does haram sounds, like haram singing, what does it feel like? And when you get that feeling like, no, this feels like it's a haram sound because it's taking people away from God, it's associated and related to just like haram kind of stuff, then no, you can't do things like that. You can't sing like that. So all the same rulings apply there too. So if those instruments are normally used for haram stuff, then you can't use it.
And she has choir this year for like grades as part of her grade.
Yeah.
Till now we did not like choose music as a part for her. We only chose arts, but now they have choir as part of her grading. So she is confused whether she has to go for it or she has to avoid it.
So there's a technical, like whether it's allowed or not, and then what might be better. So let's go with the technical fatwa first. So technically, a woman, if she's going to sing in front of non-mahrams and her voice can be distinguished between other people, like she wouldn't be able to sing alone. In the same way that women can't recite Noha in front of non-mahrams too, like by themselves. But if it's, let's say, two women together and they're reciting everything together where you can't single them out, that usually is allowed. So for example, let's say technically she was in the choir and she never had a solo. And technically that would be okay, because nobody would be able to do that. What might be a problem though is there might be somebody next to her who's not mahram, who's listening to her. That could be a problem, right? In that case, I mean, it's up to you to decide. Ihtiyat might be better there. So you could tell the school that, we don't feel comfortable with this. So for example, when I was in school and I had to get out of music, dancing related things, I told them, I said, for religious reasons, I would like to get my grades some other way. So then maybe do like a report on something.
I mean, we have to go and because I tried to email them, but they did not really understand exactly what it is. So I think we have to meet them and personally discuss and then take her. And she was actually, there were two things. One was like, it is part of the grade. Second was she was interested too. And I couldn't get proper explanation to convince her that you cannot do that.
Does the explanation make sense right now or no? I mean, if you like...
You still have more questions because for me it's like I have to do research for 2 days and then answer her. And
so do I, it's okay. I have to do the same thing.
Can I play the
flute? If it's... So again, if you're going to play like a haram song, that wouldn't be allowed. If you feel in your own mind that the flute is an instrument that's used for like haram music and it's for haram gatherings and stuff, then you couldn't do it. But if you don't think that's the case, then you'd be able to use it. I'm trying to think if there's any other rulings on that.
No, that's as far as I remember. If there's anything else, I'll double check and then I'll let you know. Inshallah. Does that make sense so far? So if you want to get involved in, let's say, using your voice, then a good way to do that is practice reciting, let's say, Quran maybe, or you can recite like Noha. Again, obviously among women only.